Well, it's back to school this week for all of our students in Kildare, both at primary and at secondary level. And I want to wish all of them and, of course, their teachers the very best of luck as they face into the new school year. And it's important as well for us in the Education Committee at the start of the school year to focus on the challenges and the difficulties facing the whole school community. As a result, as chair of the Oireachtas Committee, I had a 2-day summer school in Leinster House this week looking at some of those issues, and we picked 3 particular themes. The first that we dealt with was around the school capital programme and the need to have green spaces around schools, both for further development and of course for play area for children, because far too often we see prefabs on the open spaces and we find that there's not enough open spaces for either extensions or indeed for a schoolyard. The second item that we dealt with was in relation to the challenges facing teaching principals. Now, being a principal is a difficult enough role, but the most important aspect is to lead education within a school. It's very, very difficult for teachers who are teaching and their principal. For example, last year alone, there were 85 circulars that have to be implemented legally. There are 33 of those schools in Kildare, and what we're going to fight for is 1 day's admin leave a week for those teachers. So there'll be less disruption to the class, because at the end of the day, this is all about the children and trying to make sure that they get the best learning experience possible. Yesterday, we looked at the costs facing families as their children go back to school. And it's quite shocking, and particularly for those that have more than one child. It's about €300 in primary school we're finding, and about 765 as children start secondary school, and that's not even mentioning TY. Quite often costs can escalate up to €900. And it's not the fault of the schools. Schools are absolutely not being given enough money by the department to run their schools. Parents all over Ireland and the teachers have to raise €46 million to open the doors of the schools, to turn on the lights, to make sure that there's running water. It's just not sustainable having a situation where schools have to depend on voluntary contributions. We have to have a better system. At the moment, the capitation grant is 14% less than it was in 2010. So we have to fight to make sure that at least those levels are restored. And there are issues around school books, around VAT on e-books, and around school uniform. It's a very stressful time for parents and for schools themselves. And the one thing that I would say is that I really would make an appeal to people not to go to money lenders. A lot of credit unions are now using a micro credit scheme for very small loans, which would cover the costs of going back to school. And they're capped at 14% rent. Sometimes people go to money lenders and it can actually come out at 200%. So it's a worrying time and a stressful time for parents. But out of the debate, we had 18 different organisations and groups, including teachers and parents, in front of us. We will be making very strong recommendations to the Minister and to the Department. Speaking of schools, it was very good news for Kyle Dove during the week that they will get their extension and their ASD unit. I'm delighted for Joe Lacey, a very dedicated principal and teacher, and the community of Kyle Dove. And I did take the opportunity to question the Assistant Secretary General of the Department in relation to the whole SCET campaign, the need for a new school in South Kildare, and of course for St. Paul's. And he tells me that the decision will be made and announced in October. So I am hopeful of good things, and at least St. Paul's is in the final system at this point in time. I met with Lorraine and Chuck Charman during the week around the whole area of domestic abuse and the supports that are needed for women, and I'm not denying that some men suffer domestic abuse, and there is a programme for them in Tullamore and in Dublin. And Chuck Charman is exclusively for women who suffer domestic abuse, and there is both a day service and a service there for people who have to leave their home. I'm really glad that they have gotten funding to have somebody who's going to work with the children that are impacted. Ideally, they need to have more, because we all know that domestic violence can have an absolutely dreadful impact on children, as well as the woman that's involved. It's a huge area, and it's an area we absolutely need to do more in. I'm hosting a coffee morning in Derrinturn in Eddie's on Wednesday at 10:30. So anybody from around that area, you're more than welcome to pop in and say hello.